The Pentagon challenge is one of the most difficult challenges you can attempt in Football Manager, and it really does get people outside of their comfort zones. The goal is, within one single save, to win the top continental competition from the 5 different playable confederations within the vanilla database. So we have the UEFA Champions League from Europe, the Copa Liberatores from South America, the CONCACAF Champions League from North America, the AFC Champions League from Asia, and the CAF Champions League from Africa. Plus, to make this challenge even more difficult, you have to start with 0 coaching badges and no previous footballing experience. So I opened up Football Manager and got set to creating my profile, and there isn't a lot to pick from with those 0 coaching badges and 0 previous experience. I opted to move all of my points into mental attributes because in the long run, I'd hoped that I'd have coaches for the rest of it. And as you can see, we have several leagues loaded, so someone has to give us a job somewhere. We were given interviews all across the globe as we interviewed at clubs in Japan, Brazil, and we eventually found our first home. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you all to Milford FC in South Africa. Playing out of Richards Bay in the east of South Africa, Milford were founded in 2012 and achieved promotion to the 2nd tier of South African football just last season. I jumped at the chance for this to be the first stepping stone of this journey, so I signed an 11-month contract with the club to become their new manager. Looking at them in game, they are slightly better than what I was actually expecting for my first job. Whilst they have pretty basic facilities, they are a professional club and in my mind have one of the best players in the division in Mike Gamede, who was passionately known as Big Mike on my streams. The rest of the squad is also pretty solid for a team that was promoted just last year. But I want to be bringing my own personal style and my own tactic to this save for the duration of this challenge. So this is what we'll be running in-game. And this is it, a 4-3-3 that focuses on defensive stability with the double defensive midfielders, but allows the creative one in the middle to join the attack, arriving late into the box. We only have 2 competitions to worry about in our first season, as we will play in the South African Championship and the Nedbank Cup, which is the national trophy. However, the league odds for the championship are pretty grim reading, as we're 100 to 1 to win the title and predicted to suffer relegation out of the game entirely. But do you remember earlier when I said that it was a massive plus that Milford are a professional club? Well, it helps massively for me, as I've already applied to get my first coaching badge, the National C license. So it's time to get some games in and see how we get on with the MILFs. As a newly promoted team, we started our campaign pretty well with 2 wins in a row, but it has to be said that goalkeeping at this level is questionable at best. And going into the winter break, we also gained our first coaching badge of the save as we completed our National C license. So the team was progressing really nicely on the field, and not only was that happening, I felt like I was progressing nicely off the field with these coaching badges, and it really felt like I had the Milford FC faithful right behind me. Behind me so much that they even allow me to start my National B license, which takes 4 months to complete, meaning we should have that one in the bag before the end of the season. The transfer window opened in January, and I was able to secure some loan signings to really help us in midfield where I thought we were lacking. First up was Kakana on loan from the Sundowns, who is a massive step up for us in defensive midfield, along with Nkosi on loan from the Kaiser Chiefs to give us yet another option in that position. I also felt like we were lacking depth at centre-back, so brought in Prince Van Wy on loan from Cape Town City. We were also able to dip into the free transfer market to sign former South African international Masalesa, but he is now 32 years of age and seems like a good pickup for just £375 a week. All 4 of those signings actually do come into our best 11 and completely revolutionise the midfield, and we were locked and loaded for the second half of the season. We looked a completely different animal in that second half of the season, and for the most part were fantastic through the end of the campaign, but it was only good enough for us to finish 3rd in the table, meaning we were eligible for the promotion playoffs. The promotion playoffs are really interesting in South Africa because it is a 3-team competition. Ourselves, who finished in 3rd, we have the team who finished in 2nd, and then one of the teams from the Premiership. From the Championship, you had ourselves Ambaroka, who finished 2nd, and Golden Arrows, who finished 15th in the DStv Premiership. You have to play both teams at home and away in a little mini league, and whoever finishes top will be playing Premiership football next season. We got off to a cagey start but managed to secure a 1-0 win at home against Barocca to kickstart our playoff campaign. But in the second leg, away at Premiership Golden Arrows, we went off, smashing home 5 goals with Big Mike providing 2 of them, along with an assist to really put us in the driver's seat in this playoffs. That really pushed our confidence through the roof, so in the away game against Barocca, they stood no chance with us scoring 4 goals without reply to make it 3 wins from 3 and virtually guarantee promotion. And the last game of the playoffs saw us complete the perfect campaign as we scored a 2-1 win against Golden Arrows to collect 12 points in the playoffs and achieve that promotion to the DSTV Premiership. The success continued for me off the field as well as I bagged my National B license, which made my profile look like this attribute wise, and we do have an impressive 62% win ratio. But the coaching badge train didn't end there, as Milford even allowed me to complete my National A licence as well. And over the summer they didn't give me a transfer budget and a £23,000 a week wage budget. So I made the decision that I was going to start applying for some other top flight jobs in South Africa to see if I had some options. We had Cape Town Spurs, Stellenbosch FC, Supersport United and the Sundowns all looking for new managers. I was offered interviews at 3 of the clubs, which I did complete, but the Sundowns rejected me and decided to look elsewhere. But believe me when I say they have made an enemy of me with that, and that's probably going to be unwise for them in the future. I did receive 3 job offers from the interviews that I had to weigh up what team was the best fit for me. Ultimately, there was only one club that I wanted to move to, so we signed on the dotted line and became the new manager of Supersport United. Once I arrived at this club, I had 2 things on my mind. The first of which was securing my next coaching badge, which the Supersport board allowed, so we began studying for our National A coaching license. And the second was securing the services of a certain striker who scored 39 goals in 29 appearances last season, Big Mike. And I do have something to confess here, it is quite scummy. Whilst I was the manager at Milford FC, I deliberately did not renew Big Mike's contract so that we could hopefully pick him up on a free transfer. And that is exactly what we did.
What?
After some swift negotiations, Mike Gamede became my first signing for Supersport United. But we still had plenty of money to spend in our new job, so let's go and make some additions to this team. This summer was a really interesting one because as soon as I basically come through the door, I'd barely taken my coat off. One of our best starlets had been sold to England. Chandra Campbell made the move to Blackburn Rovers for 205k, and it allowed me to move a little bit more aggressively in the free transfer market. Our first signing was former South African international Grant Kakana for his 3rd spell at the club, alongside Nkodo Mobby, who can play basically anywhere on either side of the field. And finally, we added Liblahang Mabue to be a real creative force in that final third. We also had 2 further signings awaiting work permits in the shape of goalkeeper Manuel Arias and defensive midfielder Calvin Kapuumbu. Those 2 extra signings will be making our team looking like this moving into season number 2, with Big Mike ready to take the step up and lead the line in the Premiership. But we did luck out a little bit by landing the Supersport job, as they are in 5 competitions this season, including the CAF Confederations Cup. Now, whilst this isn't the CAF Champions League, the top tier competition in Africa, this is the 2nd tier down, and whilst this isn't actually on the list for winning and completing the Pentagon, at this stage it would be a massive reputation booster. Last season, Supersport finished in the league in 4th, which isn't terrible, but only the top 2 teams will make it into the CAF Champions League, so that is our main goal this season. Season 2 started as a real baptism of fire for me, as of course our first game of the year was at home to Milford. This game was painful for me to watch as my new side absolutely demolished my beloved Milfs, winning the game 8-1 to open my reign at Supersport. Following that up, we had 2 further wins before losing our first real test on the road to Kaizer Chiefs. And one thing that I did notice with being in South Africa is the number of competitions you can actually win here in every single season. Again, whilst it wasn't part of the challenge, we made it to the final of the MTN8 Cup, where we take on the Sundowns, arguably South Africa's best team. The Sundowns opened the scoring early, but Big Mike was on hand to pull us level on the 16th minute mark. But then left back Lyle Lakai decided it was a good time to get 2 yellow cards inside 2 first half minutes to see us reduced to 10 men. After that, it was basically a no contest as the Sundowns rattled in 4 unanswered goals to win the game 5-1, and lift the first available trophy of the season. Off the field, November saw me secure my National A license and instantly get allowed to complete my Continental C license with Supersport, footing the £768 cost. Which, in the grand scheme of things, with my attribute profile and my current reputation in game, it is absolutely massive to get these badges ticked off as quickly as humanly possible. Our main goal of the season was to secure a top 2 place in the table, and that was the only pathway into the CAF Champions League, and from December onwards, we were impossible to beat. We only dropped 4 points from the 45 available to find ourselves in a shootout for the league title at the end of the season. But on the final day of the year, we choked, drawing with Stellenbosch, whilst Orlando Pirates hammered Chippa United to win the title. But that did mean that we achieved our goal of the season, which was to finish inside the top 2, meaning the CAF Champions League is available for us to play for next season. And we actually did get our own back on Stellenbosch just 7 days later, as we pumped them 6-1 in the South African Cup final to lift our first trophy of the SAPE. Whilst we weren't in the CAF Champions League this season, we did make brilliant progress in the CAF Confederations Cup, making our way through to that 2-legged final. Here we had to take on ES Sahel from Tunisia in that final, and came back from a goal down to win the first leg 2-1. Then in the second leg, Ndlovu extended our lead in the second half before Neo Rapu put it beyond doubt, converting from the penalty spot to see us lift the CAF Confederations Cup. I really don't think this season could have gone any better had I planned it. We achieved our goal of being able to play in the CAF Champions League last season, and we added 2 bits of silverware to our trophy cabinet to bolster our reputation. But I want to complete this continent as quickly as humanly possible and move on to other areas in this challenge. The Supersport board gave me a £2.1 million transfer budget for the summer, and believe me when I tell you that goes a long way in Africa to make ourselves ready for the title and a Champions League push. And on a personal note, we managed to secure that Continental C license, and Supersport paid for me to instantly start my Continental B license. Meaning I would only have 2 more left after this to completely be a professional level coach. I meant business this season, and I got active in the transfer market early, bringing in 4 South Africans to act as key squad players for us this season. But yet again, I was stung by the 1-month wait for work permits, as I have 7 players that would really revolutionise our team waiting in the wings. As things stand, we are a little bit light on the ground going into the first game of the season, and if you look at the media preview, we have an uphill battle as we're predicted to finish in 4th in the league. However, Season 3 will be intense on this squad as we have 6 trophies that we can potentially win this season. And whilst they're not all worth loads for my actual reputation or in terms of Hall of Fame points, I like silverware. And for the first time in this save so far, we will actually be playing in a trophy that we need to win, as we will be entering the CAF Champions League for the first time. The start to the season was incredibly cup heavy as we made progress in both the MTN-A and the CAF Champions League qualifying. However, we did then crash out of the MTN-A at the semi-final stage, using a fully rotated 11 for the tie. Which is frustrating, but ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, this trophy is kind of meaningless. September 2026 did see us reach our next professional milestone as we completed our Continental B license and racked up our 100th game in management. Attribute wise, I think I'm doing pretty well, and we now have a 3-star reputation along with a 71% win ratio. However, the Supersport board was starting to get a little bit worried that I was becoming too qualified and rejected my application to start my Continental A license. We also managed to get some of those transfers over the line before the window shut, as defenders Nathan De Medina, Abdulmunim Boutil, Colombian winger Jean Cordoba, and Algerian midfielder Yassine Tretawi all joined us on free transfers. And I wanted a little bit more firepower up top, so signed Sakil Lapaza from Orlando Pirates for just 91k. So we were ready to cook for this season, and there are still an absolute plethora of trophies on offer in South Africa. And as CAF Confederation Cup winners last season, we also had to take part in the CAF Super Cup, where we would take on Al Ahly from Egypt. And this would be a massive test for us because they've actually won the CAF Champions League for 5 of the last 6 seasons. We almost instantly went 2 goals down in the final, with the Egyptians dominating from the off. But we did manage to score 2 goals of our own just before half time to go in all square. Then we came out a completely different team in the second half as Cordoba and La Paz both scored to see us win the game 4-2 and lift the CAF Super Cup. And this was a huge statement of intent for us because we actually proved that we can beat the best team in this continent. Domestically, we were looking fantastic in the league, powering our way through most of the teams in the division. But we did massively rotate in the domestic cups, which saw us lose in the second round of the Nedbank Cup to Orlando Pirates and lost on penalties to Stellenbosch in the final of the Telkom knockout to sit and watch them lift the trophy. In December, I also had the opportunity to ask for my Continental A license again, and this time Supersport agreed. But this one takes 12 months, so I'm hoping this will be my last coaching badge at Supersport United. After the winter break, we were almost flawless, only dropping 5 points from 18 matches to finish the season top of the league with 77 points, and we actually lifted the trophy on the penultimate game of the season. So, we were the best team in South Africa. How about the rest of the continent? Well, our qualification and group stage was actually flawless, with us winning every single game. Our quarterfinal draw saw us take on ES Sahel in a repeat of last season's CAF Confederations Cup final. However, we were a completely different animal this season as we hammered them 4-1 in Tunisia before beating them 3-1 at home to secure a 7-2 aggregate win and our passage onto the semi-finals. And here we had the hardest team of all as we had to face Al Ahly again, this time over 2 legs. We were at home for the first leg and we really dominated the game, but could only win 3-2 on the night with us conceding 2 of the 4 shots on target, which is beyond frustrating. Then, back in Egypt, we struggled in the game and found ourselves quickly 2-0 down at half-time, therefore in a losing position on aggregate. However, with 15 minutes of the game to go, we made things all square with substitute Matodzi. But we couldn't score again, meaning that we lost the tie on away goals. Yeah. Away goals. Do you remember those? Let me know down in the comment section what you actually think of the away goals rule, because when this happened, I was pretty pissed off. So despite winning the league title, we will remain stuck in South Africa for another season, and we have another £1.3 million to get this team over the line. This summer, I meant business, so we went out and we started splashing the cash to make some key additions to this team. First up was in goal, as Ronwen Williams was a £300,000 signing from the Sundowns, but he is the South Africa national team keeper and captain, so I don't think I could have done much better. Next up, we signed a duo from the Kaizer Chiefs, as Masani came in to add competition for that left back spot, and he was followed in by Mobara, who will be a pure utility man for us in this defence. We also added 4 additional players on free transfers to bolster those squad options to give us the depth for the run-in in the multiple competitions that we will be in. I also have work permits waiting for 2 strikers, and I will tell you that we ended up signing Brazilian Vinicius Melo, who will be a stone cold killer in this league. We only have 5 possible trophies to play for this season, and I want to be lifting as many as possible as we hopefully secure part 1 of this Pentagon challenge with that CAF Champions League. Domestically, this season, we were outstanding, as you probably would expect of a team of this caliber. We made it to all 3 domestic cup finals using a fully rotated 11. However, we did only win one of them as we were crowned Telkom knockout champions for the first time in this save. In the league, we did play our first team though, and looking at the results, you can see how much more dominant we are versus the rest of the league, only losing 2 games in the first half of the season. To close out the year, we also completed our Continental A license after the last 12 months, and Supersport were gracious enough to pay for the start of our Continental Pro license. Which is awesome, because that means in 12 months time I will have achieved every single coaching badge possible in this game, and everything else will just come down to experience and our ability to win matches of football. After the winter break, we continued to dominate the league in South Africa, which actually saw us win the league title in February with a 3-2 win against Golden Arrows. That allowed us to rotate for the business end of the season and the latter stages of the CAF Champions League. And in that CAF Champions League, we blasted our way through the qualification path along with the group stage, topping our group with 14 points. Meaning we moved into the knockout stages of the competition, where we first had to take on Wydad Casablanca from Morocco. We were outstanding in the first leg on the road and raced out to a 3-goal lead inside the first half. Casablanca did then respond with 2 goals of their own, but Grant Marjaman added a 4th for us with just 5 minutes of the 90 remaining. The second leg back in Pretoria was similar in the fact that we scored 2 goals early, securing that safe pathway through to the semi-finals. However, there was a massive result for us at this stage, as defending champions Al Ahly were knocked out of the competition by Simba, a team from Tanzania who were actually in our group. In the semi-finals, we did however face Egyptian opposition, this time with Zamalek, and we had to travel to Egypt for that first leg. We were a little bit sloppy in the first half and gave away a penalty which was converted, but after a bollocking at half-time, we scored 2 important away goals to take back to South Africa. But ultimately, we didn't need them, as we destroyed Zamalek in the second leg, scoring 8 goals on the night, with Vinicius Melo bagging 3 of them. So we moved into our first ever CAF Champions League final, and it would be a all South African affair as we would take on the Kaizer Chiefs. Overall, SuperSport have a mixed record against them, but since I've been at the club, we've only lost twice in 8 matches, with us winning 5 of them. So I was pretty confident of a win here, especially over 2 legs. We were at home for the first leg and took the lead on the 18th minute through January signing Oswin Apollos, who was back at the club for his second spell. The Chiefs did pull themselves level minutes later, but Jesse Don was on hand to tap us back in front after some good work from Vinicius Melo. We added 2 further goals in the second half to win the game 4-1, but that away goal did bother me, especially as I'm still not over what happened last season. But then in the second leg, we quickly cancelled out that away goal as Vinicius Melo scored inside the first minute to actually relax me just a little bit. However, that was pretty short-lived because our goalkeeper decided this would be the game that he would drop his worst performance of the season. The Kaizer Chiefs only had 3 shots on target inside the whole game, but they all found their way into the back of our net, giving me a very nervous final 10 minutes. But we were able to hold on to be crowned CAF Champions League winners and secure part 1 of this Pentagon challenge. So we will be resigning as the manager of SuperSport and finding ourselves a new job. But when you look at our manager profile after 200 games in charge, we should be able to have our pick of the jobs elsewhere around the world. After saying goodbye to our friends in South Africa at SuperSport, especially Big Mike who was set to retire, our attention turned to our new job hunt, and there were 3 that I had my eye on. 2 of which were in Mexico, as both Club Leon and Deportivo Guadalajara were both looking for managers, and this is perfect because that means I get to completely avoid the MLS and that whole farcical draft and rule system. Elsewhere, I applied for the Kashima Antlers job in Japan, as they were down in 12th in the league and struggling. Having interviewed at all 3, the first to offer me a job was Kashima Antlers, so we made the move to Japan with the Asian Champions League in our sights. The Antlers have clearly been having a poor season and have recently parted ways with Yachi Watanabe after just a year. And you can see why they binned him, because the team sit 12th in the J-League table and they are already out of the J-League Cup. But this club are the record holders when it comes to J-League wins and are a 1-time winner of the AFC Champions League. So it's definitely possible to actually get something achieved here really quickly because the club is so prestigious in Japan, basically, and because of when their club season runs, which is from February through to December, we start right away. We get straight into the action. Looking at the team, we already have some good players at the club, but also some young Japanese talent in the shape of Toshiro Yamamoto and Yuki Sugimoto. We will be taking the tactic that works so well with SuperSport with us to Japan, and this is how the team lines up for our first game in charge. I know that it will take some time for the team to learn the tactic here, but there were positive signs in our first game in charge, even if we did lose 1-0. Our first month in charge wasn't the best, as we only gathered 4 points in the league, but we did advance in the Emperor's Cup second round. Then July hit, and obviously the European free transfer free agent window was open, so I went and I attacked it with some vigor, because there are so many players. You can basically register anyone you like in Japan, but only 5 non-Japanese players can play at once, and obviously there is the same similar registration rules for the AFC Champions League, so whilst I did want to strengthen, I didn't want to go overboard. However, the first 2 men through the door were seasoned Japanese internationals, as both Daisen Maeda and Yunyi Aito both arrived on free transfers to give us that experience that this team needed. We also improved our backline with the signings of Franklin Tebow and Lewis Binks, again on free transfers. And then I even surprised myself with these next two because I couldn't believe it. We first then signed former Benfica midfielder Martin Neto and followed that up with the huge German striker Philipp Tietz, who is going to absolutely dominate in this league. Our biggest outgoing in this window was Brazilian striker Fabrizio, who didn't impress, so he was sold back to Brazil for £3.4 million. And those transfer funds allowed me to sign another young Japanese starlet in Kazuki Nakajima. Once the work in the transfer window was done, we boosted the levels of tactic sessions in the training tab and started getting results on the pitch. So much so that after July, we actually went unbeaten for the remainder of the season in the J-League. Those results saw us surge up the table, but we could only achieve a third place finish in the league with 72 points. However, that top 3 finish does mean that we qualify for the AFC Champions League next season. And you can tell that Philipp Tietz was a superb signing for us, as the big German scored 25 goals in 15 appearances in all competitions and even won himself the J-League Golden Boot. This season we also made it to the final of the Emperor's Cup, beating teams like Yokohama Marinos on the way. It was league champions Vissel Kobe in the Emperor's Cup final, and I really wanted to get my first piece of silverware in Asia. And it was the big man of Philipp Tietz who got us off to a flyer, scoring twice inside the first half before Toshiro Yamamoto added a third just before half time. Vissel Kobe did score a goal, but in the 80th minute, Daisen Maeda completed the game for us with a very nice finish. And just like that, we won our first trophy in Asia, but now the real work starts. Money is tight here at the Antlers, as we only have 800k to spend on improving this squad to make it ready for Champions League action. And that is largely down to the club moving to their new stadium Zico Park to start the new season. Yes, the stadium is named after the Brazilian legend who played in Japan from 1991 to 1994. Off the field, we also completed our final coaching badge as we bagged our Continental Pro license, and I have to say that our managerial attributes are looking lovely, along with a 78% win ratio. In between these two J-League seasons, I didn't really feel the need to shuffle around the personnel too much, because I feel this team, with the form that they had to the back end of last season, is very much capable of winning this title. However, we did say goodbye to 5 players, making us a total of 625k, and we signed yet another Japanese new gen, as this time we welcomed Koichi Akimoto for £3.9 million. So this is how the team looks going into our first full season as the Antlers manager, and I'd like to improve us defensively, but I feel we have lots of firepower, especially with Tietz leading the line. As Emperor's Cup winners, we will also take part in the Japanese Super Cup, which is a rematch of last year's Cup final as one of our 4 competitions this campaign. However, due to when the Japanese league season runs, there is still an AFC Champions League underway, which sadly we are not part of, with the new group stage starting in September towards the end of our actual league season. So we will be actually keeping an eye on this to see who actually does go and lift that trophy and who potentially our main competition could be next year. So our season started with the Japanese Super Cup, where we managed to score a nice victory over last year's league winners to lift our second trophy as Antlers manager. And we carried that result into the J-League as we were dismantling teams left, right and centre to fire out a real statement of intent. But I wasn't done there, as the Japanese transfer window was still open, so I added a few more players to get this squad Champions League ready. First up was Australian Y-man Brendan Richardson, who arrived from Melbourne City for £1.2 million, and he was followed up by Japanese national team left-back Yaidi Fuji for £6.5 million. Then, as the European club contracts ran out, we decided to add Yuki Kobayashi, Cohen Castiles, Wilfred Ndidi, and Francisco Ortega to the club, all on free transfers. With those additional signings, we were virtually unstoppable domestically as we fired our way through to the first cup final of the season, which was the J-League Cup. Surprise, surprise, we'd faced Vissel Kobe in this one, and we raced out to a 2-goal lead going into half-time with our new gens running the show. But then in the second half, we completely fell apart, with Belgian international keeper Cohen Castiles dropping a stinker to concede 3 of the 4 shots Vissel Kobe had on target. So it wouldn't be a complete clean sweep of everything that Japan has to offer, but we were still so good in the league this year. Results in the second half of the season weren't as impressive as the first, but we raced into the club's first league title since 2016. And we even made it back to the final of the Emperor's Cup for a second season in a row, without really ever getting out of second gear. This season it was City Group club Yokohama Marinos in our way of a treble, and they didn't put up a huge amount of resistance as we dominated them from start to finish, winning 6-1 to lift back-to-back Japanese Cups. But whilst these trophies are great for 1, my win ratio, and 2, my international reputation, there is only one trophy that matters in Asia for me, and that is the AFC Champions League. We were drawn in Group J alongside teams from Australia, South Korea and Thailand, and we found this light work as we won every single game to top the group with maximum points. And we've been drawn against South Korean side Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors in the second round, but that won't be happening until next season. As we move into Season 7 of this save, I had to make some key decisions with certain personnel at Kashima Antlers. Philip Tietz deteriorated a lot last season thanks to an Achilles injury, so he was sold to German side Bochum for 500k. We also had Dazen made a demand a transfer as Qatari side Al Arabi paid an initial £7.5 million for his services. He's now earning 85k a week compared to the £35,000 a week he was earning whilst with us, so I kinda get it. On the incoming side of things, we secured the services of Motoki Nangakura on a free transfer, along with signing Thailand international midfielder Pongsakorn Panya for £1.1 million. We also splashed a little bit of our newfound cash as we dropped £4 million on Japan under-19 striker Koki Saito to lead the line, along with another £3.9 million to the same club for Noki Kimimoto. I also raided South Korean club Suwon Blue Wings for 6'4" centre-back Baek Dong-yong. We also have 2 other deals that I am working on to start the season, but domestically the board is expecting us to dominate and is looking for another league title win as a minimum. However, that will have to wait because our AFC Champions League campaign resumes first. In the second round, we were drawn alongside Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors from South Korea, and we were at home in the first leg. We were in command of this game from the start and managed to take the lead early through Kazuki Nakajima, letting fly from the edge of the area. And then just before halftime, Australian Brandon Richardson made it 2, applying a nice finish to a Kyogo Tsunimoto low delivery. And 2-0 is how it ended at Zico Park, meaning we avoided any away goals for the opposition as we move into the second leg in South Korea. Then we managed to bag ourselves the away goal in Korea, with Yuki Sugimoto netting the first goal of the game early in the second half. Hyundai Motors did score a goal of their own from the spot, but that was all they could muster as we won the tie 3-1. And before we move into the rest of the action, I added 2 more additional signings, with both of them arriving on loan. First up was Dortmund striker Thomas Weidmann, who looks like an outstanding player for this level, so I am really expecting him to dominate. And he was followed in from Europe by Tomofumi Okada, who joined us from Feyenoord to give us another Japanese option on the wing. Diving back into the action of the AFC Champions League quarters, that threw up an all-Japanese affair as we would have to face Yokohama Marinos. We were at home for the first leg and quickly racked up goals as our defensive midfielders bagged, with Koichi Akimoto and Toshiro Yamamoto both getting on the score sheet. In the second half, Yokohama pulled a goal back after a piece of sloppy defending from us to give them a potentially important away goal, because they do count in this competition, much like they did in Africa. But in the closing moments of the game, Akimoto scored his second to give us the 2-goal lead to take into the away leg. On the road, we took the lead twice on the night to only see the City Group team pool level, but the result from the first leg was enough to see us progress through to the semi-finals. And it was at this point that I was told on stream that it is actually geographically locked in this competition, east and west, so we could not face any of the Saudi teams, so we were actually drawn alongside Australian champions Sydney FC in the semi-finals. We had to travel to Australia for the first game, and it was a tight affair with us probably edging it, but in the 92nd minute, Koki Saito managed to score a huge away goal for us. Back in Kashima, things were much more straightforward, with Masaya Shibiyama dominating the game, scoring an outstanding hat-trick as we won 5-2 on the night and making it 6-2 on aggregate. So we moved into the final and our first attempt of winning the AFC Champions League, and we were drawn alongside Al Ittihad. The Saudi club are currently managed by Julian Lopetegui in game and have big names in their squad such as Andrew Robertson, Nathan Ake, Nico Gonzalez and even Rafael Leao.
I don't get nervous, but I'm starting to get a bit shaky, you know what I mean? I'm a little bit weak.
So the final of the AFC Champions League itself is played over 2 legs, with the away goal rule being in effect, so we needed to have a good performance in the first game. We had the first leg at home, so I needed to start on the front foot, but also make sure that we didn't concede any goals. And just before halftime, we were rewarded from a set piece as 6'4" South Korean centre-back Bak Dong-yong headed us into the lead. Then in the second half, we added a quick second through German Thomas Weidmann to really put us on the front foot. Things then went from bad to worse for the Saudi side as they were reduced to 10 men minutes later as their defensive midfielder received his marching orders for a second yellow card. So with a man advantage, it was time for me to step on next. So I really went for it and was rewarded as Weidmann completed a second half hat-trick to see us virtually have one hand on the trophy. For the second leg back in Saudi, we knew we would have to weather the storm, and Al Ittihad scored early in the 6th minute to give them some hope. Then as we started the second half, it happened. We bagged a huge away goal as Francisco Ortega received the ball in the box and lashed it beyond the goalkeeper to spark pandemonium. Al Ittihad did score again later on through Rafael Leao, but we didn't care as we were crowned AFC Champions League winners at the first time of asking to complete the second part of this Pentagon challenge. So our attention turned to our next role, with a job in Mexico being right at the top of my priority list. But sadly, there weren't any jobs going at this time, so we stuck at it with Kashima for the time being. We continued to play through the Sei through June, July and even into August, and things were going swimmingly in Japan, with the team 5 points clear at the top of the J-League and in both cup quarter-finals. However, during this time, we did have 2 interviews with 2 different clubs. First up was Brazilian side Cruzeiro, who are a 2-time Copa Liberatores winner and have R9 Ronaldo as their chairman. Then the second interview we had was with Mexican side club Necaxa, who haven't had any continental success at all, but they are a 2-time Liga MX champion. I felt it was the right time for me to tackle the CONCACAF Champions League and create a new superpower in Mexico, so we became the new manager at Club Necaxa. Whilst they're not one of the most notable clubs in Mexico, I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of talent in their playing squad. Our key players are on the wings for this team, and they have former Lazio man Luca Romero on the right and Brazilian Riquelme Felipe, who looks like an outstanding talent in game, but he is currently wanted by Liverpool right now. And then the jewel in our new Mexican crown is central midfielder new-gen Norman De Jesus, who I will be looking forward to driving this team on. With the tactic in place, you can see where this team's weakness is, and that is defensively, but we have an amazing amount of firepower right now. The club have already started their Liga MX Apertura campaign and currently sit 10th in the table with 4 points. And for those of you who aren't aware of what happens in Mexico, basically the league is split into 2 different parts, an opening phase and a closing phase, and the winners of both get themselves into that CONCACAF Champions League, which is where I want to be this season. Well, I say this season, I want to be in those top spots to be in the competition for next year. And obviously we have 2 bites at the cherry of doing this, so anything can happen. It is football at the end of the day. Our first game in charge was away to Deportivo Guadalajara, and Felipe really showed us what we'd be missing if anyone were to come in for him, as he bagged a goal in each half and provided an assist in a 4-0 demolition job. That result was followed up by 2 defeats in 3 matches, but we slowly did see the team begin to transition and understand our tactic and exactly what was expected from them. So much so that we finished the season with 3 successive wins to finish the Apertura in 8th and qualifying for the knockout portion of the competition. And at this stage, this is where it goes into a knockout competition where predominantly ties are settled over 2 legs, both home and away. But there is some very interesting rules in Mexico where the higher team has a priority seeding. So if you finish first in the league, you could draw a tie and go through because you finished higher. There's no extra time, there's no penalties. You just go straight on through. So being in 8th in the table is not a good position to be in. Due to our lowly position, we even had to qualify through a preliminary round where we took on FC Jerez. This one was pretty one-sided as we rattled home 3 unanswered goals to advance into the quarter-final stage. And this is where we have those 2-leg ties, so we will take on Club Leon in the first one. And despite going a goal down within the first 60 seconds, the squad rallied round to score 4 first-half goals of our own, with left-back Aldo Cruz pulling the strings. We scored a 5th goal in the second half through Andreas Colorado to take a nice 4-goal lead into the away game. The game on the road was a lot more balanced, with Club Lyon taking the lead twice on the day, but we equalised twice ourselves to win the tie 7-3 on aggregate and move into the semi-finals. Here we had to face Xolos Tijuana, who finished top of the table, so as the lower ranked side, we were at home again for the first leg. But much like the quarter-final, the team on the road really seemed to struggle, so we took full advantage to score 3 goals without reply and take a nice lead into that second leg. And here we held firm to achieve a 0-0 draw on the day to make a surprising move into the Apertura final, where we'd face Club America. As you'd expect for any final, this was a tight game, with us scoring the only goal through Riquelme Philippi on the stroke of half-time. In the away leg at the Azteca, we extended our lead through Marcelo Flores, but Club America scored twice in 3 second-half minutes to make the game all square. So with the tie in the balance, up steps our best player Philippi, who cut inside the area from the left-hand side before firing the ball across the goal and into the side of the net to see us win the tie 3-2 on aggregate and see us crowned Apertura winners. Now, this is massive for us, because not only does this help me on a reputation level from a personal standpoint, the club also increases in reputation because of it, and we will be in the CONCACAF Champions League next season. The league in Mexico is split into an opening and closing stage with a transfer window in between. And with this new reputation boost and Champions League qualification in the bag, I decided it was smart to cash in on our key assets and reinvest in young Mexican talent for next season. Over that winter period, we sold over £14 million worth of players, with Luca Romero being the key outgoing, departing the club for China for £9 million. We used that money to improve all over the pitch, as we made 11 signings in January, including new goalkeeper Jose Alugio, new defenders Diego Ramirez at centre-back and Rodrigo Ferreira at left-back, and midfield reinforcements in Jesus Nieto and Victor Mendez. Those signings freshened up this team and also made it a little bit younger, also a little bit more Mexican, as we moved into the closing stage of the Mexican League. And I saw this as a little bit of a free hit, as we'd already qualified for the CONCACAF Champions League, but we absolutely blew the competition away here to top the table and move straight into the quarter-finals of the knockouts. The quarters were pretty simple, as we won the game on the road 3-1 before dominating back at home to secure a 2-0 win. But this is where things got a little bit tricky, as we faced recently defeated Champions League finalists Deportivo Toluca, who have been shopping in Europe, as they have Luke Thomas and Harvey Barnes playing for them. As we finished higher in the table this time, we were on the road first and got caught completely cold here, as Toluca hammered us in this one, with Thiago Tomas scoring an impressive hat-trick to see us on the ropes for the second leg. But, as I mentioned earlier in the video, these Mexican teams really seem to show a little bit of stage fright when it comes to the away leg, which is really strange. Gustavo Coutinho pulled a goal back for us in the first half, but in the second half, Toluca collapsed under the pressure, conceding 3 goals in the final 20 minutes to see us win the tie 4-3 on aggregate. And as if it wasn't difficult enough for us in the closing stage final, we would have to take on CONCACAF Champions League winners CF Monterrey in this final. We suffered a narrow 1-0 loss on the road in the first leg, but given how these teams play on the road, I knew I'd be fine. Back home, we were in control of the game, with Coutinho, De Jesus and Venegas getting on the score sheet to see us lift the closing stage trophy, which made it pretty conclusive that we are the best team in Mexico right now. And that bodes well for us, as a Mexican team has won the CONCACAF Champions League in the last 6 seasons. And we did all of this while selling our best player Riquelme Philippi back to Brazilian side Flamengo in March. The finances aren't great at Club Necaxa, so we might have to sell some more players if we want to invest over the summer. And over the summer, we did make some moves, as fullback Jose Castillo left the club for the UAE for £4.2 million, and we also sold Marcelo Flores to Pachuca for £2.3 million. Oh, and last season's top goal scorer Gustavo Coutinho is on his way back to Brazil for another £3.5 million. But that did mean we were able to reinvest in this squad, where I went heavy on new gen talent using my Wonder Kid Finder. and if you haven't used this, I will leave a link to it in the video description, but it is positively the best way to go about finding new gens in your save. My guys who watch on stream love this filter and they're using it in your saves, and I would highly recommend that you start using it in yours as well, because it allows you to find some absolute gems. First up was fullback Jose Miguel Yamin for £3 million, and he was followed in by centre-back Rafael Manzotti for £4.4 million. They were followed in by wingers Faisal Al-Dosari and Julian Polanco, both on free transfers, and English striker William Williams, yes, that is his name, from Fulham for £1.2 million. So the team has a bit of a new look to it, with 8 of the players in the best 11 now being new gens. It's getting to that part of the time in the save because we are moving into 2030 at this point. Much like last season, we have both the opening and closing stages in Mexico, but we have also added the Leagues Cup and the CONCACAF Champions League to the schedule this season. But the Champions League doesn't start for us until March, so let's get into that opening stage. We started the season pretty well with a draw on the opening day and followed that up with back-to-back wins, but the season then went on a pause as we were participating in the Leagues Cup. This is a competition where they take some of the teams from Mexico, some of the teams from the US, and some of the teams from Canada and throw them together in a little tournament geographically located, which is pretty interesting, but ultimately not a big part of this challenge for us, so I kind of saw it as a little bit of a warm-up to the CONCACAF Champions League that's coming later on in the year. We entered at the quarter-final stage where we took on San Jose Earthquakes from the MLS's Western Conference. And this was quite possibly the biggest mismatch I've seen since we arrived in Mexico, as we rained down goals on this American side, ultimately winning 7-0 to move into the South semi-finals. The semi saw a clash of Mexican titans as we would have to take on Tigres away from home. We took the lead in the second half through Joshua Mancha, but that goal was quickly cancelled out by Rocco Simic. And that's how the game stayed, taking it straight to penalties, where our keeper came up clutch, saving 2 spot kicks to see us advance into that South final. It was American opposition again, as this time we take on Chicago Fire in what was a tight game, but we came out on top again with William Williams scoring the only goal of the game on the stroke of half time. And the eagle-eared of you would have heard me say that we were part of the South Final, where the winners of every single final, geographically north, south, east and west, go into a little tournament, and then it's a little bit of a playoff where you are drawn against one of the other teams. This whole North American thing is hella confusing, but at least I avoided the MLS. We were back to facing Mexican opposition as we had to take on Deportivo Guadalajara, but we hammered them in this one, having 36 shots in total, but ultimately only winning the game 2-0. So we made it to another final where we would have to take on CF Pachuca. But this was a lot more even, with Union Polanco getting the only goal of the game in the 84th minute to see us lift the 3rd trophy of our reign in Mexico. And whilst this ultimately doesn't matter to our achievements in this save, we do see this as a little bit of a warm-up for what's to come later on in the season, which is good. But in the meantime, we went back to the Apertura, where we struggled a little bit after our Leagues Cup success, but righted things towards the end of the competition as it went into the knockout stages to finish top of the league. Just like last season, we had to take on Club Leon in the quarterfinals, and this season we lost the game away from home 2-1, but I felt confident that we could progress with the second leg being at home. Polanco opened the scoring in the second leg, but his goal was quickly cancelled out by Rodrigo Villa just 9 minutes later. Faisal Al-Dosari then scored in the 67th minute to make it 3-3 on aggregate, and that's how the game stayed. Now, as I mentioned, this is where Mexico is crazy. Because we finished top of the table, we just go through. No extra time, no penalties, no chance for the other team to get any more goals. That's it. We just move on, which is good for me. I'm happy with it. The semi-finals were much more routine here as we brushed Tijuana aside, winning both legs 2-0 to set up a final with CF Pachuca in a replay of our Leagues Cup final. This one was over 2 legs, however, and we were on the road first, and even surprised me as we beat them 3-0 on the night to effectively retain the Apertura there and then. The returning leg was a bit of a goal fest, ending in a 3-3 draw, but we retained the Apertura for a second season. Which is good, because if things go tits up in the CONCACAF Champions League this year, that means we're in the competition again next time. Over the winter break, I dipped my toe into the transfer market as I signed Juan Felipe Arango from América de Cali in Colombia for £2.5 million, just to give us a little bit more firepower. We then started the closing stage well again in dominating fashion, but as soon as the Champions League kicked in, I used the league as a rotation option to make sure that we were fresh for our #1 priority. As we moved into March, the CONCACAF Champions League draw was done and we had to face Minnesota from the MLS in the second round. We travelled to the States for the first leg and came back with a 2-1 lead thanks to a brace from Captain Fantastic Norman de Jesus. In Mexico, we stamped our authority on the Tide to score 3 first-half goals to coast to a 5-1 aggregate win and progress to the quarter-finals. It was an all-Mexico tie here as we'd have to face Tigres, a club that we've kind of struggled to beat previously. Well, that definitely wasn't the case here, as in the first leg, we demolished them with skipper Norman de Jesus leading the way in a 5-0 win on the road in the first leg. The second leg was a little bit more closer in scoreline, but we still came out on top, winning 2-1 on the night with goals from Arango and Mancha. So it was Mexican opposition again in the semi-finals as we'd have to face Club America, and this time we'd be at home in the first leg. Much like in these other games, we raced out into a 3-goal lead going into half-time, with Saudi international Al-Dosari scoring twice. But in the second half, Club America battled back, scoring 2 goals in 3 minutes to give me something to think about going into the second leg. This one was played at the Azteca, and the two sides could only be separated on the day with a strike from Jose Nieto from the edge of the area. And that result meant that we made it to the CONCACAF Champions League final at the first time of asking, where we'd have to take on Atlanta United from the MLS. We went out and dominated this one from the off, but we couldn't find a breakthrough until the second half as Julian Polanco whipped an outstanding free kick into the back of the net. That goal meant that Atlanta had to attack, and we were able to counter-attack them and were awarded a penalty in the 87th minute, which William Williams was on hand to smash home. And that meant that we confirmed it, and Section 3 of this challenge was complete. Meaning we only have South America and Europe remaining, and I kind of want to leave Europe till the end, so I guess we have to go looking for jobs in either Argentina or Brazil. Whilst we were applying for jobs, we remained in the CACSA and even won the closing stage of the Liga MX for a second season in a row, meaning that we played 6 finals in our time in Mexico, winning them all. We're now over halfway through this challenge, and this is what our manager looks like right now. We have a 5-star reputation, a 77% win ratio through 429 games, and we've won 19 trophies in 9 seasons. But our time in Mexico has come to an end, so I hit resign and started looking for my next role. The first one that I liked the look of was the racing club job in Argentina, but they appointed some guy called Lionel Messi to be their new manager. Then managers started to fall in Brazil as both Grêmio and Atlético Mineiro both sacked their managers, so I applied for both roles. Now, at this stage, I do have to give a caveat that unfortunately, before I started the save, I did not apply the fix to actually address the Brazilian kits in this save. I'm sorry. I know it's going to offend people. I'm sorry. Both clubs then offered me an interview and even both offered me the jobs, but I had to pick Atlético Mineiro for a couple of reasons, so I signed on the dotted line to become their new manager. Reason number 1 is the fact that the club's best player is former Chelsea man Angelo, who has returned to Brazil after his Chelsea career did not take off. Imagine that, one of the youngsters that Chelsea actually signed in real life not getting the game time that he thought and returning back to his home country. And the second reason that I chose Atlético Mineiro was the fact that they're already in the Copa Liberatores this season. Before I took over, they came second in their group behind Flamengo, meaning we will take on Palmeiras in the second round knockout fixture. Palmeiras currently sit third in the Brazilian league, whilst we are down in 13th as I take over at the club. So I know this is a long shot, but anything can happen in football. We're bringing our successful tactic to the club, and this is how things look ahead of my first game at the club, with Angelo effectively making everyone else look bad from a star rating perspective. Our first game in charge was away to relegation-threatened Avi, so I was expecting a nice 3 points to kick off my time in Brazil. We scored a goal either side of halftime through Emerson and Angelo, so I thought it was on the cards, but then we fell apart. Avi scored 3 goals in the final 20 minutes to see us lose our first game in charge. That showed me the level of work that we do have to do, but I couldn't rest on my laurels because in 2 games' time, we had Palmeiras in the Copa Liberatores. And I knew it would always be difficult against a club like Palmeiras, but in the first leg at home, we took the lead through striker Daniel, but we ultimately lost the game 2-1 with Hernan Vega and Jose Roberto scoring late goals for Palmeiras. That result meant that we'd have to attack them on the road and gave a good account of ourselves, to be honest, but we did lose the game 1-0 on the night to exit the Copa Libertadores this season. So that meant it wasn't going to be a quick turnaround in Brazil, so that meant my attention had to solely focus on the league and achieving that Copa Libertadores qualification the next season. And after that cup exit, we were outstanding in the league, only dropping 9 points to skyrocket up the league. So much so that we went into the final game of the season, third in the table, just 1 point behind Flamengo. And that final game of the year was away to Flamengo, meaning that if we beat them, we'd be crowned Brazilian champions. We had to travel to the Maracanã in Rio for the game, and I was instantly sucker punched as our former player at Club Necaxa, Riquelme Philippi, put Flamengo ahead inside the opening 5 minutes. But this team showed great character to score twice before half-time to go into the break top of the table. But then in the second half, Brazil's best team scored a second to see the game end in a draw and see them secure their 8th league title in 9 years. So we finished second in the table, which is a huge improvement from the 13th place that we were in when I took over. However, I do have to show you the goal that in my eyes cost me the title. It was away at Fluminense and my goalkeeper did this.
What is the goalkeeper doing? Why are you there?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that goal either. Given when the Brazilian league runs, we will have some January transfer window antics to enjoy as we get ready for our new season. We have £7 million in our transfer budget, and star player Angelo is wanted by several clubs across the world, and he has a £14 million minimum fee release clause. In the off-season, we got very active in this window to really allow me to put my stamp on this squad, because we had several players in the team that I needed to get rid of to allow me to do that. This window saw both Daniel and Paulo Vitor join Chinese club Shanghai Port for a combined £27 million. And they were followed out the door by Damian Garcia, who joined Shabab Al Ali in the UAE for another £8 million. Once away, wide man Angelo is currently still at the club after rejecting multiple contracts in Saudi Arabia, but Inter Milan have agreed to pay his £14 million release clause, so I expect him to leave in this window. One of our biggest signings in this window was striker Lina Silva, who was listed as a wonder kid and has been capped by Brazil at under 20 level, and he cost us an initial £12 million. In this window, I also raided the relegated teams from last season as I signed winger Nardoni from our rivals Americo Mineiro for just $750k, and I also picked up 2 players from Santos as I signed goalkeeper Mateus Costa and defensive midfielder Lucas Gabriel for a combined £8.5 million. However, these players are 3 of 6 waiting to join the club after the first game of the season. Other signings include former Palmeiras new-gen Adir, who joined Dutch side Heerenveen 2 seasons ago, but we are bringing him back home to dominate our midfield, and Vélez utility man Alberto Bustamante. But this being Brazil, we have fixtures all over the place in several competitions, starting off with the Minas State Championship. We opened the season with a Minas State Championship where we won almost all of our games except from one to make it all the way to the State Championship final. This was to be held over 2 legs, and we secured a narrow 1-0 lead in the home leg thanks to Nardoni heading home from a corner against Cruzeiro. However, the game on the road was more tricky, with the opposition winning this game 2-1. So in the game, it actually played the animation with us lifting the trophy. However, there was a lot of confusion in the stream because we didn't win the title here. Cruzeiro did actually win the title by finishing higher than us in the league table on goal difference. So cheers for getting my hopes up, SI. Before our league campaign started, we also had the Brazilian Super Copa where we would take on last year's champions Flamengo. Lin Silva gave us the lead on the day before half-time, but Flamengo were able to pull level just a few minutes into the second half. But then we took over the game with goals from Angelo and Lucas Gabriel. Flamengo did score again in the 94th minute, but we held on to be crowned Super Copa winners. And again, whilst this doesn't actually count towards the Pentagon challenge, this is actually a nice little confidence boost for me, knowing that we can actually beat the best team in Brazil over the last 9 years. However, this season my attention was solely on the Copa Liberatores, and we were drawn in Group G alongside teams from Paraguay, Ecuador and Colombia. But this was pretty straightforward, as we won 5 of the 6 games to top the group and move into the knockout portion of the competition later in the season. However, that wasn't until a lot later in the year, so my attention then focused on domestic matters, namely the league and the Brazilian Cup. And our start to the league was outstanding, going unbeaten for the first 3 months of the season to really show how much we'd improved in the off-season. Our first league defeat of the season came against Grêmio in July, but that was the game before our Copa Libertadores knockout fixtures, so I'm blaming the result namely on fielding a fully rotated team. And just before our Copa Libertadores second round tie, we were handed a massive blow as star player Angelo finally agreed to leave the club, opting to join Manchester United for that £14 million minimum fee release clause. However, that didn't derail us too much as we faced Everton de Viña del Mar from Chile and cruised into a 3-0 lead in the first leg away from home. Back in Brazil for the second leg, we showed our ruthless side as we hammered the team from Chile, running out 8-1 winners on the day to coast into the quarter-finals. July also saw us hit a personal milestone in the save as we racked up 500 games in management, and we've now got a 5-star reputation along with a 77% win ratio, which for me I don't think that's bad over a sample size of 500 games. The Copa Libertadores threw up an all-Brazilian tie for us in the quarter-final stage where we would have to face Grêmio, and I find that a little bit poetic as they were the other team that offered us a job as we arrived in Brazil. The first leg was away from home, and despite being the better team, we suffered a 1-0 defeat thanks to an 85th minute goal from Mario after a defensive mix-up on our side. In the home leg, we were able to pull the tie level through Lucas Gabriel, but we couldn't score again to see the tie end 1-1. Now, there is no extra time here, so the game went straight to penalties. Both sides scored their opening penalties, but with our second, Emerson saw his saved, giving us a huge task to advance in this competition, with lots of pressure falling at the shoulders of our goalkeeper Costa. Following that, both teams were clinical from the spot until Grêmio's last spot kick, where Costa came up clutch, saving well to his right-hand side. Jose Rafael thundered in our first sudden death penalty before Costa turned into Superman, denying Mario to send us into the semi-final. At this stage of the season, we were advancing in every single cup competition whilst playing superbly in the league. So much so that we even made it to the Brazilian Cup final after naming a rotated 11 in every single fixture to that point. Here we had to face Flamengo over 2 legs, but I have to admit, this trophy wasn't really one that I cared about winning. We shared a 1-1 draw in the leg at home before losing 4-2 at the Maracanã to see Flamengo lift the trophy, but as AFTV's Robbie would say, we have much bigger fish to fry.
Bigger fish to fry!
We moved into October as we would have to face Argentinian giants Boca Juniors in the Copa Libertadores semi-final. The first leg was in Argentina and Lin Silva gave us the lead inside the first 60 seconds before Luca Langioni equalised for Boca. But then in the second half, Antonio Mamede headed us back in front from a corner before Emerson made it 3-1, directing a Mamede shot into the back of the goal. Back in Brazil for the second leg, things were much more comfortable as we scored 2 goals in each half without reply to win 4-0 on the day and 7-1 on aggregate to book our place in the Copa Libertadores final for the first time. And 2 league matches later, we managed to secure the Serie A title with 4 games to spare after a 3-0 win away at Bragantino. And that meant that we could rotate the team as much as possible to make sure everyone was fit and healthy going into that Copa Libertadores final later in the year. And we definitely need it as we have to face the final boss in the Copa Libertadores final, Flamengo. This time the game was played at a neutral venue in Bolivia, so I thought I stood half a chance here and took the lead in the 25th minute as Simon Renteria cut in from the right hand side before lashing the ball into the back of the net. But less than 5 minutes later, Flamengo were level as we missed several opportunities to tackle Lucas, who scored a lovely solo goal to make it 1-1. And then in the second half, disaster struck. As we were trying to play out from the back, one careless back pass allowed Lucas a golden opportunity to put Flamengo into the lead, and he didn't miss, giving us 15 minutes to save our season. I completely ripped the tactic apart and threw the kitchen sink at Flamengo to get back into the game, and were rewarded in the 86th minute as Sandri's deep cross was headed home at the far post by Nardoni. And then I was getting prepped for a penalty shootout for all the marbles, and this happened. There were 5 minutes injury time. It's happened! Oh my god! Oh my god, the pass back! It's happened! One each! '93rd minute! Monteza. And that goal was enough to see us lift the Copa Liberatores and complete the 4th part of this remarkable story. With the last leg of this challenge being in Europe, I was hot property amongst some of the best clubs in the continent. We secured our first job interview with Aston Villa within 56 minutes of us applying for the gig, but followed that up with interviews at both Juventus and Marseille. But then, something huge happened. Liverpool sacked their manager Ange Postecoglou, and I had to apply. The interview was pretty straightforward, and days later I was offered the job and became the new Liverpool manager. On the field, things weren't too bad at the club as they're still in the Champions League and in contention for the Premier League, along with being in both domestic cups. However, it's off the field where they are really struggling. Not only are they in mountains of debt in terms of their bank balance, they have some of the most ridiculous player contracts I have ever seen. We have players like Oscar Gloku on an eye-watering £625k a week, along with goalkeeper James Trafford on £400,000 a week, just to name a few. So there's some serious work for me to do here. But it's not all doom and gloom, because Liverpool do have some of the best players in the game at their position. In the right back position, we have Iranian new gen Saeed Alami, who we can all agree is outstanding. And on the left wing, we have Portuguese superstar Edmar Gonella, who has physicals to die for. But as we join mid-season, we get straight into the action with our first game against Leicester City. This was a nice, comfortable introduction to the squad, as one of the most expensive players in the world of football, Oscar Gloku, opened the scoring inside 10 minutes before Darwin Núñez added a quick-fire brace to see the game end 3-0. Meaning that the Hood era at Liverpool was well and truly underway. January saw some positive results for us as a club as we moved into the FA Cup 5th round and booked ourselves our first cup final appearance as we made it to Wembley to face Manchester United in the EFL Cup after beating Everton over 2 legs. We also secured a top 8 finish in the league phase of the Champions League with comfortable wins against Rangers from Scotland and AC Milan from Italy. However, January saw a huge transformation for us in terms of personnel as we had a massive clear out. 16 players left the club during this window, including 9 on permanent deals, to make us a total of £240 million. Notable outgoings included Darwin Núñez to AC Milan for £39 million, new-gen defensive midfielder Zaban, who joined Manchester City for £65 million. We also said goodbye to long-time servant Alexis McAllister, who joined Spurs for £8 million, and Milos Kerkez, who was sold to Inter Milan for £51 million. I then sold both Fernando Valdez and James Trafford for Real Madrid for a total of £75 million, but that saved us over £600,000 a week on player wages. And finally, we let Ibrahima Konate join Marseille on a free transfer to remove his massive wage from the club. But don't worry, we reinvested in the playing squad, bringing in Brazilian wonderkid striker Paulo Roberto Milano from Palmeiras, who I've wanted since I was back in Brazil. I followed that up with the defensive midfield additions of Sebastian Florenz from AC Milan and Luis Eduardo Gomez from Santos Laguna. Another one on my shortlist since my time in Mexico. And James Trafford's replacement in goal was Massimo Todaro, who joined us from Palermo, who saves us over £300,000 a week in that position. Those deals allowed us to really sort out the club's financial situation, as the club is still in the red somehow. So the new look Liverpool was in place, with Dominic Szoboszlai being the only recognised Liverpool face in the starting 11. Moving into February 2033, things are going great for us in all competitions, winning all 4 4 league games without conceding a goal and knocking Manchester City out of the FA Cup before playing that EFL Cup final against Manchester United. It felt like we were in control of this game, twice taking the lead at Wembley, only to see United pull level, meaning the game would be settled via penalty shootout. But unfortunately for us, this is where club captain Trent Alexander-Arnold missed the goal entirely with his spot kick before Savio crashed his penalty off the outside of the post to see United lift the first piece of silverware of the year. After this, our performance in the league was a little bit hit and miss, but we did do enough to secure a 4th place finish in the Prem, meaning we will be playing Champions League football next season, if we needed it. Whilst we tasted defeat in the EFL Cup, the same couldn't be said for the FA Cup. After knocking out City in the 5th round, we pushed Tottenham and Derby County aside to set up an FA Cup final against Arsenal. And it was the Gunners who took the lead at Wembley through Rodrigo, but Ben Doak was able to pull us level just before half-time. The game remained deadlocked until Oscar Gloku scored the all-important goal in the 114th minute to see us secure our first trophy of our Liverpool reign. But I know you're all here for the Champions League, and I have to say it, this is one of the craziest knockout performances you have ever seen. We were drawn against Bayer Leverkusen in the round of 16 and faced a trip to Germany for that first leg. Despite being away from home, we dominated this one with Savio finding the breakthrough on the half-hour mark, but we were handed a little bit of a gut punch in the 91st minute as Junior Krupi outjumped our 6'6" centre-back with 19 jumping reach to make the game 1-1. But back at Anfield, I was still pretty confident of progressing. However, it was Leverkusen who took the lead on the night through Maximilian Bayer to get me a little bit twitchy. Luckily, that didn't last for long as Szoboszlai pulled us level just 5 minutes later. But despite hammering the German side, we couldn't score again through the rest of the 90 minutes and extra time to see the game decided via penalties. Both teams were scoring from the spot until David Nunes saw his penalty saved by the Leverkusen keeper, and then there's no better way for me to actually talk about this in the edit, so I'm just going to pass over to a clip of me on my live stream. What league you in? Nunes has just missed. Oh my god, he's missed. Oh my god, he's missed. Vega. Oh my god, no. No. Oh god, here it goes. What is happening? Botello on as a substitute. Scores. Horby. I don't know who you are, my man. We need a big save here. He's missed! They missed 3 in a row. W's. Yes! So we made it through by the skin of our teeth and had to face Arsenal at the quarter-final stage. The first leg was at the Emirates and it ended in a rare 0-0 draw, and then the power of Anfield fired us through in the second leg. We won 6-0 at Anfield, with Hernan Vega scoring an impressive hat-trick in a pure demolition job. After dismantling Arsenal, we were handed another all-English tie at the semi-final stage, as we would have to face Manchester City. The first leg was at the Etihad, where Eduardo Camavinga opened the scoring for City on the 15th minute, but Lloyd McNeil was able to pull us level just before half-time, heading home from a corner. After the break, we were handed a golden opportunity as former player Zaben, who I actually sold to City in January, deflected the ball into his own net to put us in front in the tie for the first time. However, that was pretty short-lived, as Tchouaméni scored just 2 minutes later to make it 2-2. But, much like the last round against Arsenal, Man City couldn't handle Anfield in the second leg. We ripped them to shreds on the night to secure a 4-0 win and comfortable passage through to the Champions League final at the first time of asking. It was PSG in the final who demolished the likes of AC Milan and Atletico Madrid to make it all the way to that final. The game was held at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff, the city that I actually live in, and the stage was set for this challenge to potentially end. And less than 10 minutes into that game, we had our breakthrough. Giant defender Lloyd McNeil leapt highest from a corner to nod us into the lead. Then early in the second half, we were awarded a penalty for a foul on Gloku, which Brazilian Paulo Roberto dispatched. Kylian Mbappe did pull a goal back for the French Giants, but the game was concluded in the 78th minute as Edmar Gonella scored our third of the game with a deflected effort that found its way into the back of the net. The save is complete! Completed with Liverpool, we were here for less than 6 months as we lift the Champions League trophy, boys and girls. Meaning, this Pentagon challenge is over. At this point, our career spans 6 teams across 5 continents and including a whopping 564 matches, winning 24 trophies in just 10 full seasons. And to boot, our manager attributes are now looking tasty to continue this story, as I've decided to actually turn this into a Glory Hunter challenge created by the amazing Dr. Benji, which we are doing live on Twitch right now, twitch.tv/HoodGamingUK. Come on over, check out the story as we continue this save. I really hope you've enjoyed this save, and obviously we will bring you the Glory Hunter that we are doing live on Twitch after this, because I think you're going to want to see it, because this is a very, very interesting universe that we've built up with all the new gens and the fact that we're 10 seasons into the future. If you have liked this video, please don't forget to smash a like on it so that you can see more of me from this channel, because it will appear in your sub boxes more. And if you haven't subbed, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. Until next time, guys, take care.